Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the next episode of our recording interviews, and today we have a special guest, Liss, who I've personally been a fan of for many years. I used to be a huge fantasy football fanatic for 3 or 4 months a year, every year, and I'd eat up everything I could. And I came across Liss's analysis, and I just liked how he looked at things and sports and betting and analysis on sports, and then it carried over to his kind of analysis on the real world and what's going on with the world and such. And he has his own podcast now. I highly recommend. It's called The Real Man Would. It's kind of it's a humorous title. He can talk more about it in a second. But yeah, Chris, welcome to the show. You want to give any kind of introduction to yourself or what you're doing?
Sure. Thanks for the nice intro, Emmet. I run Rotowire with a couple other guys, rotowire.com. It's a fantasy sports site. But I also have a podcast, and that's A Real Man Would. And that is kind of a joke because we used to just joke around when it was on our old podcast saying, well, a real man would do this. And it was always something crazy that you would never do or never should do. And the motto of The Real Man is encouraging senseless risk of catastrophic loss. So if you're encouraging senseless risk of catastrophic loss, you're a real man. For example, my co-host Dalton Del Don, we're in the survivor pool, and somebody you can see on the spreadsheet like who's used what teams, and someone used the Texans this year who's still alive. And we're like, that's the dangerous guy. That's the real man because he used the Texans. When we first saw that someone used the Texans, I thought that guy's drawing dead. Like he's dead money. There's no way anyone who would use the Texans could survive. But here he is in week 11. So. So we have this podcast. It's sports, it's gambling, it's fantasy sports, and it's also some politics and some, it's gotten taken over by COVID politics because obviously that's on everyone's mind lately. But so I'm a fantasy sports guy. I know this is an investment podcast, and you guys are very good investors, and you have some very serious investors on. I am not one of those. I have investments. I'm happy to talk about them. I don't think it's quite on the level that you guys are used to, but I have some ideas about things.
Cool. Yeah. No, I really just like your style of thinking and how you look at things in a contrarian point of view, or, you try to clear away all the noise and just look at things from a fundamental first principles point of view on you just look at things differently. You're not just told how to think about things. So I like that. That's good. And one interesting take with regards to like sports betting odds that I know I think you and your host do, which I found very interesting as a style I've done in the past, and I just think it aligns well. Is like, when you look at the NFL, if you're following NFL games, there's betting odds that the Vegas odds makers come out with every week, and you kind of want to look at the matchups before you look at the odds. So in your mind, you can kind of determine what you think the odds should be. And then you kind of see what the Vegas odds makers show for those matchups. Is that right? You kind of do an exercise like that, like a mental exercise?
Yeah, we do that. I didn't always do that, but I started doing that. And I don't know how much it helped, but I think it's good because once you see a line, which is the market number, you can't unsee it. So you see everything that you think through, oh, the market's right, or the market's not right. The market is hard to beat in the aggregate over time, given the rake, but it's not right. It's just probably more right than if you were to personally set the lines and let the market bet into you. You would get crushed. So once you see a line, which is millions of different people coming together to create this line, essentially, you then forget what you actually think because you now have a good model of what the line should be, and then your actual observations get sidelined. So in order to combat that, you make the lines yourself. And I remember that we have a professional gambler, Rufus Peabody, on our XM show. We have a Sirius XM show. And he said, make next week's lines now too, so that you can see all the recency bias that because you don't know what's going to happen in this week's games. And so then you see like, oh, wow, this line looks so different. But in a way, those old lines are in some ways better because they don't have the recency bias of what happened afterwards. So there's a lot of techniques to kind of stop you from just getting too biased by what the market is saying, basically.
Yeah, no, that's something I think we do in our investment philosophy practice in a way is with options, stock options, call options, for example, on stocks that we think have potential to be very disruptive. And so if there's a tool called the probability lab for options, where if you pull it up, it shows, 1 or 2 years out or a certain time frame when the options expire based on what the actual market is pricing the options at. what the probability is on those pricings right now in the market, what the probability the stock will get to that price at that time. And so, like you were saying, in your head, if you can kind of come up with a probability, like we've done this with Tesla, where we think, oh, Tesla, before they had their S&P inclusion event last year, it was trading at $400, and thought, oh, it could get to like $700 or $800. I think there's like a 20% chance in two or 3 months to like double in price. And then I pulled up the probability lab, and the $700 strike options or $800 strike options were pricing in like a 5% chance of that happening. And I was like, oh, this is way off from what I thought. But if I had looked at that first, maybe it would have skewed my bias to think, oh, maybe 5% is right. So we were able to kind of take advantage of that, for example. And so I think the same kind of, thought exercise with investing can be used with sports betting. And there's a lot of similarities I've seen over the years, just to be honest. But
yeah,
so it's interesting.
Yeah, that sounds like a great tool. So you basically look at the option prices at different strike at different times, and the tool calculates the implied probability of that, of any one of them happening. Say,
yes,
we do that with the survivor picks, right? So you can look at if a team is minus 400 and plus in the underdogs plus 300, we average it because there's rakes on both sides, so it's plus 350, and you can easily calculate 350 divided by 450. Well, that's the percent chance that the favorite wins. And you can get the implied odds that the market is basically telling you. They're not perfect, but it's, if you think this is a slam dunk, then again, you find some value there. So that is similar.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So speaking of Tesla stock, I know in the past, and and by the way, your podcast has been great. Like when sports was off for like a full year, you still continued your podcast, and I loved, listening to it and your discussion about, what's going on in the world, like what we don't know and what could be happening here. And how did you come about, like your way to look at things? Like what brought you to be able to look at the world in such a way where it's like, more of a, what I think is like first principles, a term everyone uses because Elon Musk, uses it. But I think you kind of look at things from a fresh viewpoint too. How, do you find yourself being, different to other people, or what kind of led you to think like this, I guess?
I think what happens is the default is first principles, right? You know nothing about anything. So you think, okay, well, what do I know? And you start, I'm a philosophy major in college. So, you read like Descartes, I think, therefore I am. What else can I know besides the fact that I'm thinking? And if I'm thinking, I must exist. That's the ultimate first principles. Yeah. But there's that, but also just like, if you don't know anything, then you have to start from what you can see with your eyes, what's around you. I mean, you got to start really basic, right? And normally we think we know things because we have a media that tells us things, and we have peers that believe certain things, and we have sort of our group, whatever our tribal beliefs are, our country's beliefs, whatever the people we associate with. And so we buy those, but if you start to see those become more and more false, and you realize, well, they're lying to me about Russia and this and that, there's weapons of mass destruction, and people forget that. They move on. The next week, they're believing whatever's being said. And when you realize that it's all bullshit, can I say that on this podcast?
Yeah,
you realize that so much, everything's a lie. Well, you're lost. You have to go back to first principles. You can't trust, because really it's either argument from authority, somebody else knows better than me and I'm going to trust them, trusting somebody, or it's science, and science is first principles. So what can we figure out? What do we actually know? And how can we use what we, or maybe not even know with metaphysical certainty, but with some certainty, and build on that, like what's likely true or what's possible. And so I think it's just natural. It's a natural outcome of doubting the things that you used to believe, I guess.
Yeah.
So why do you speak about that like it's such a kind of natural way to view the world, but I think if you kind of look at the numbers, I don't think most people actually think that way. I think a lot of people kind of use heuristics, or they use kind of group identity. They say, oh, I'm a liberal, so I'm going to kind of tend to believe what the folks in the liberal crowd are believing me, or vice versa on the conservative side. But I think anyone kind of viewing things objectively, at least here in the United States in the political system lately, can say, oh, both sides have been lying or misrepresenting things. But I think you still kind of see that same tribalism. Maybe there is a growing middle political center that's starting to kind of question things. But I'm curious, like, is your experience that your kind of view on the world and ability to kind of reason and challenge, every little bit of information that you're having, is that rare in the type of people that you speak with? Because it does seem that most people don't do that type of reasoning.
Maybe I get some pushback, and people they take exception to some of the things I post, even though it's my feed, dude. You don't like it, don't follow it. I don't jump into their feeds and fight them about the bullshit that they believe. I don't care what they believe. Most of them are muted anyway. But the point is, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to lose respect. I just don't want to know. But yeah, I get, most people, but I think it's sort of unconscious, right? Because I guess there's two kinds of people, right? There's like people who want to know what's true to the extent that you can know, right? You want to know what's true. And I think because you have a faith, it's almost like a faith that long term, it's in your absolute best interest to know what's true to the extent you can know it. Like I have absolute faith that knowing the truth is better than not knowing the truth. That's just a matter of faith, because I could be wrong about that, right? I can't prove to you that knowing the truth is actually better than believing a comforting lie. I can't prove that to you, but I have an absolute faith that the comforting lie, it might be good in the short term, but you're going to hit a really rough spot when that thing is so debunked that it gets exposed, and you've been, relying on this information that's false because it was comforting. But I do think that a lot of people, they believe what they need to believe to get along. So, if you're working in a corporation and you, don't believe that, and I don't care about Donald Trump. He's like an irrelevant person to me, but you don't believe that he's the bad guy and everybody else in your company does, and you start chit-chatting, they're going to be like, what's wrong with you? You don't think this guy's the bad guy? He's obviously the bad guy. He's horrible. Yeah. He's a Nazi. He's Hitler. If you don't believe that, and you're like, that doesn't really make sense. Like there's really nothing, he's a clownish guy, but like, is that really what he is? You're not going to get along well in certain environments. You're just not. And so people, I think unconsciously, it's not that they've like really looked through the evidence and they've come to this conclusion. It's that unconsciously, I think it's just in the short term, it's better for them, for their, social relations, for their professional life, to have certain beliefs. So their whole belief system is geared toward what is advantageous to me, what's going to serve me, in my professional and social life, rather than what's true. And they just don't have faith that believing what's true is going to be better for them in the long run than believing what's convenient. And I don't even think they're consciously working this out. I just think instinctively they want to do well socially and professionally, and they believe what they need to believe in order for that to happen. And I'm just not wired like that. I'm not envious of them at all, because I do think it's going to be a really rough time, because reality tends to intrude. I mean, it's just hard to be insulated forever. So I have a huge faith that like it's the right thing, even if it doesn't serve you in the short term or with your peers or professionally. Now, whether you want to talk about it or come out with it or not, that's a different issue. But at least to try to find out what's true, I think is important. Yeah.
Now, how do you handle that, like on Twitter, or I know you say you just speak your mind, which is great, and I admire that. And a lot of this stuff rubs people's nerves the wrong way, like obviously, and people come after you or troll you on Twitter or social media, or write bad reviews about your podcast because they disagree with your thing, and you've been really, I feel, noble the way you kind of try to be transparent about it and talk about it. And, what are your thoughts about that? Like, are you happy with it, or does it bother you a lot? Does it make you lose sleep ever? Or tell us about that a little.
I mean, I can get riled up. It can bother me a little bit. I try to be magnanimous and treat people as though they're in good faith, unless it's just an obviously like bad faith attack, assault, whatever. And I try to sort of put them in their place in a way that exacts a cost for coming after me, so that like, okay, like you might embarrass yourself if you come after me in front of everybody on Twitter. So you can try to signal to your friends that you're the good guy and I'm the bad guy, because I have a belief that's not permissible in your world. But there's going to be a cost. Like I'm going to be calmly try to be clever about it and sort of, be kind of harsh. But I also feel like I'm trying to the people that just in good faith, even if they're a little negative, try to be also in good faith and sort of talk to them. And sometimes you're arguing with somebody, but that person will never be convinced. So you're basically responding for other people watching the conversation, so that maybe they may change their mind about something or consider something they hadn't considered. And normally, like, I like to argue and persuade. And sometimes it's like, who cares if this random dude on Twitter, is persuaded. But I do feel like right now the stakes are especially high, and I've had a lot of DMs and people say, wow, I've thought about things differently, or I didn't realize the bullshit that this was until I was thinking about it after you posted this. And it makes me feel good, not because, it feels nice that, at least it has some minor impact, but also because I just feel, and we can get into this later if it's a topic for this pod, that we're in a very precarious economic political situation right now. And I feel like we're all sort of, like every person is sort of the battlefield of the mind, to convince people that look, there's things more important than 100% absolute safety. And if we go for that, and I don't even think that's what it's really about, we're going to have some truly disastrous effects that are going to hurt us all. And I just am very, very against it. And I just feel very compelled to do my part. So I sometimes will engage almost to a fault with people, because I feel even if someone's watching that and it opens a thought, this is like each one of us can collectively, sway the tide, win the battle. And hopefully it's not a kinetic war. It's just a war of ideas, and you win the war of ideas and we avert something really horrible happening.
Yeah. And I know, obviously we do investing. We'll talk about Tesla and Bitcoin in a minute, but let's go on that tangent for a little bit, because I do think the way you think about the current political environment with COVID, or just, politics, polarizing politics and such, is a view that needs to be considered. And I think a lot of people just want to not even acknowledge your view, whether it's right or wrong. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but your view is your view, and you should be able to express it without outlandish backlash or people just insulting you or calling you names. I like to hear your view. What kind of is your view on the COVID state right now and politics?
Well, I think, COVID is a virus, and people get sick and some people die of it. And it's, everyone who dies is it's a tragic thing. Obviously, if someone dies in a car accident or a virus, and a virus is contagious. So, it obviously has the potential to harm more people. But I feel like the, whatever you want to call it, the government, corporations, whatever the collective entities, the ruling class, whatever you want to call it, have exploited this real, I don't think it's as big of a crisis as they make it out to be. I think, obviously it's a disease, and people should, especially if you're at risk, you should take precautions and take whatever medicines you want to take. But I feel like they've exploited this in a way that is just so disproportionate to the situation. And it's incredibly dangerous, to say, well, you don't, if you don't want this medicine, you still have to have this medicine, and we're going to make you have it, and we're going to fire you and destroy your ability to make a living and ostracize you from society. And I just think that's a no-go, even if, let's just concede. And I don't think there's good evidence the vaccine really stops the spread much at all. There's highly vaccinated places with huge case numbers. But even if you said that it did, I would say you still shouldn't be able to force somebody, because that's, perfect health is not the only value in society. People having choices over what they put in their bodies is a pretty important value in society. And people not, being sort of in this medical government tyranny is an important thing to have. And not having to show your papers to get into a restaurant, I think, is an important thing. And, and not being sick until proven healthy. I'm sick until proven healthy. I'm not sick. I walk around, but I have to prove that I couldn't even be sick because I have this paper. And, you're innocent until proven guilty. This is another way of subverting that. You're basically guilty of this illness, you're a super spreader, you're a killer, basically, until you prove that you've done this thing. This is an incredibly dangerous road to go down. So yeah, that's my view on it. I feel like, climate change is another one. We should be conscious of emissions, of the pollution we're doing to the planet, of our machines, whether there's something going on there that's going to be harmful. I think we should be conscious of it. But they're going to take this and they're going to turn this into a power grab, I think, just like COVID. And I think we need to be extremely careful about this is an issue. It's a real thing, but who's going to misuse this? And I don't know. I just think we're in a really dangerous time, because it's happening in front of our face.
Yeah. And I think on your most recent podcast, I heard you talk about, and I've heard you reference before, even the Nazis, they weren't necessarily evil people. They were just kind of doing what they were told to do, right? I mean, they were just kind of part of a system, and it turned into this big evil, right? I mean,
well, it was this, I haven't read the book, but I read an excerpt from Hannah Arendt, and it was The Banality of Evil. And she, met with a Nazi to, figure out how could this happen? And she thought she would be running into this sociopathic, obvious monster, but he was this kind of dull guy who just did what he was told. And I think
was this Adolf Eichmann?
It was Adolf Eichmann, right? And so that was the book. I just read an excerpt. You might have read the whole thing, or
I read a different book. I read Hunting Eichmann about his whole history, and So yeah, and I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same one.
Yeah, I think that was the guy that she was talking about. And then also I read this other excerpt where, in the mid 30s, they were like, okay, well, the Jews are spreading diseases and you should go over here. And you have to wear this gold star. And it wasn't like all at once, like the true horror of it didn't happen right away. It was incremental. It was like, well, we need to do this for your safety, and we're going to separate people for this reason. And it was just, one little thing after another that in the end just became monstrous. I mean, it was monstrous from the beginning, but, and the guy talking about it was like, if you told somebody about it, they'd be like, you're paranoid, you're alarmist. And he'd say, but you are an alarmist because you can't prove what's going to happen, right? You can't say this is going to lead to this because you don't know the future. But it was like, again, we don't know. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I think that would be just a ridiculous
you can't shut your mind off that possibility. I mean, you just have to stay open-minded to all the possibilities that could happen from this. Yeah.
Yeah. And not just possibilities, but it's going down the path, and it's, we don't know exactly what the end point of that path is, but it's not an acceptable path to even begin down, let alone get to the horrors of the end of it. So, I'm conscious of that. And it doesn't really, it's not so much like I'm going to predict which specific things. Everyone's like, well, what do you think the real agenda is? And then they want you to say some conspiracy theory that you obviously can't prove. But like, I'm not going to do that because I don't know. I don't have I'm not into the Illuminati or some crazy, I don't know what the agenda is. I just know that what's happening now in front of my face is totally unacceptably wrong.
Yeah.
And people just don't want to look at it. They want to just go about their distraction and pretend like, oh, no, this is just going to come back to them. They can't conceive of the government being this evil. But if you look at human history, the people in power, when they have a lot of power and people do comply with what they're asking, the norm is abuse. The norm is misuse of power.
Yeah.
It's not, the norm isn't, oh, we'll stop now that you've, now that COVID's over. I don't think it stops.
They're serving the greater good at that time. They don't understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we don't have to get too deep into this, but
yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's refreshing because there's parallel, with this kind of, I feel like it's a combination of the media business model being so advertising clickbait driven, combined with the political system and, seizing power. The natural incentive of any politician is the top incentive is to get reelected, and they have to seize power to benefit their constituents and so forth. And so the combination just culminates to like this kind of some nasty outcomes sometimes, such as what we're seeing perhaps. But I think there's a parallel there with almost the Tesla stock. I think there was a narrative for so long with Tesla being like this ridiculous, overpriced, thing that is going to come down. And Chris, you had mentioned the reason I think I first reached out, wrote a review on your podcast a few years ago when you were right about I agree with most things you say, but not Tesla or something. You read it out loud. I was like, oh, that's cool. He read my review. But you were very negative on Tesla originally, and you've come around to change your mind. I mean, that's a good sign. Like when someone is publicly willing to admit they're wrong on something and kind of change their mind, that's obviously a good signal in my mind of the person being somewhat of a ability to be a clear thinker, or someone that can, admit they're wrong publicly and change their mind. But I mean, what was your initial thought on Tesla? I mean, you probably, without knowing it, just kind of absorbed the headlines of whatever you were reading for news finance and not realizing the potential. And now you think, maybe you haven't come around fully, but you've gone from, in the past, I think you'd mentioned publicly you'd bought puts at one point on Tesla, which expired worthless. And now
that was an expensive lesson. That was a lesson that I paid for.
Yeah. And what led you to that point to buy puts? It wasn't so far as you just disbelieving them, but you actually bought puts on Tesla. So, first, talk about that, and then let's talk about what led you to the other side. Yeah.
So I'll just say, even before that, I owned Tesla at 170, and I think I sold it at 300, and then it went. I don't remember. It was in the 200 somewhere. And I posted on Twitter, this might be 4 years ago. I don't know when. I said, I'm thinking of buying some Tesla. Anyone with more experience than me want to talk me out of it? And a bunch of guys were like, it's a generational short. Don't do it. Don't do it. So I didn't buy it. Right. And then I think it was 280 and it went down to 170 again. And I was like, thanks. I said, thanks to the guy. It was maybe a few months later. Right. And then of course it went back up to 300, but I was like, yeah, it's bullshit, and then, and then it started going up, but I was out. I just didn't really deal with it. I had made a small profit on the amount that I bought. So then, cut to March of 2020, and the market just is starting to collapse. And I'm like, holy shit. We knew the market was overvalued for 5 years. It's crazy, right? Interest rates are low. the economy's not as good. It's not as good as the market. This has got to be crashing. The stock market had gone up so much. And then 2020 starts crashing. And then we knew that this huge demand shock. We don't know how bad COVID is going to be. And I'm thinking, okay, like this is crazy. So they start printing money and the market starts bouncing back. And I'm thinking this is just fake because, the demand lag is going to be so huge. Like there's people have lost jobs. There's just no way things are going to come up. I want to short it, or I want to short the market. And I did buy a put, I think, on the S&P also, but it was mostly on the S&P, which I also lost money, obviously. But I was like, well, what's one stock that's like, the real no connection to the earnings, to the valuation, all this stuff. And I was on financial Twitter, which is mostly bullshit, I'm now realizing, but I was, I didn't know, it wasn't my area of expertise.
Yeah.
So I bought a bunch of puts. It was mostly I lost money in the S&P. I actually didn't lose that much on Tesla, like $1,000 or something, less than that even. But and it just kept going up. And I had a friend who kept being like, should we buy it? This is at 500, it's 700 before the 5-way split, and I'm like, no. He's like, should we buy it? I'm like, no, it's 900, And I think I shorted it. I think I bought the put at 900 before the split, and it split 5 ways and it's at 1,000 now. But so, I was wrong. I don't think it's an easy one to admit because there's not even, I can't even argue it. There's not even a case to be made on my side.
Yeah.
But I ended up buying some Tesla in June and it's almost doubled. And then it's gone down a little bit, but it's, so yeah, I'm back in.
Good.
But it's not for the reason that most people think.
Yeah. I know you have a different reason for kind of being long. What's kind of you have kind of a unique reason. I think I didn't fully understand it, but maybe you could kind of explain it here a little bit. What your reason for being long is? You think there's like a possibility of some kind of
I need like a whiteboard. I need like a whiteboard to explain this because it never works on the radio. And I'm super into this. I'm super into these big numbers. I went down this rabbit hole. Okay. And you have you guys know, like, addition is sort of iterated counting and multiplication is iterated addition. Instead of 3 plus 3 plus 3, it's 3 times 3, right? And then exponents are iterated multiplication, 3 times 3 times 3, 3 to the third. But there you can go beyond exponentiation. You can go to tetration, which is, 3 to the 3 to the 3 to the 3 to the 3. And you can go beyond that, okay, to hexation, pentation, and hexation. And these numbers, these functions grow like you wouldn't believe. And I went down this rabbit hole. There's a function called the tree function. Tree of 1 is 1. Tree of 2 is 3. Tree of 3 is a number I can't even do it justice with words. You can't do anything in the physical universe. It is so beyond anything. There are functions that grow incredibly, incredibly fast. And I was reading this guy. He was a MIT professor. I think he's at Texas now. And he was saying, big numbers used to be like a triviality, like who could name the biggest number. But he said he didn't agree. He thought that whoever can name the biggest number is the one who has the biggest paradigm, basically the biggest function growth, the person who can create a function that grows the fastest. And I remember Elon Musk saying something to the effect of, it's whoever innovates the quickest is going to win or something, whoever can, And I read this book called The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch, this physicist, and he says, humans, the whole knowledge creation is sort of error correction is really our ability. And what is innovation but error correction? Is iterating quickly. And so what you see is it doesn't matter what the number is in the function or where you start, or I'll do it in Tesla terms, how many cars he's selling. Oh, Toyota sells many more cars. Like that doesn't matter. That's just the number you're starting with. It's who has the fastest growing function that's going to win, right? Because if you look at these numbers, they grow ridiculously. So it almost seems like he's sort of attuned to that sort of hyper growth rate. So, and he's obviously in all sorts of, different, it's not just cars, it's like all of this software and AI and all this stuff. And I don't know anything about any of this and I haven't even looked at it, but I was like, oh, this guy, right or wrongly, is tapped into the idea of just, the fastest growing function is going to produce the biggest number, basically. And I just said, after I wrote an article about it, I wrote a Substack post on it, and I bought it based on my own. I posted this, and then I thought about that. I said, how can I not own Tesla just on the off chance that this is really what he's doing? He's just building a faster function. So at the beginning, it doesn't look like anything, but like once it starts going, it just outstrips everything. So that was my basis. Yeah.
Interesting investment theme. Matt, I haven't heard that one. I mean, it seems valid, like a valid way to look at it. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, I think a lot of people are focused on historical metrics, like you're saying. So like, a couple of years ago, it was, they'd only produced whatever it was, 100,000 cars a year or something like that. Even if they grow to 500,000 cars per year, they're still small compared to Toyota or whatever. But the rate of innovation is absolutely, the much more important thing here. I mean, because I think a lot of financial analysts out there and investors in general, you love to use kind of historical metrics because it's facts, right? It's a much harder exercise though to try to skate to where the puck is going to be, 5-10 years from now. And so I think the fact that you can recognize that, and especially in a disruptive, high growth industry, well, I think a lot of people found that the trap of thinking that automobile is like this stale, like low margin, low unit growth. We actually were just on another podcast, I think yesterday, where somebody was kind of saying, yeah, automotive, like, it's just low volumes, low margins. It's not really super attractive. But the mindset of like improving so fast creates a tremendous amount of value. But yeah, I've never heard it described the way that you did describe that. And it's really interesting. And I think you're right now on the automotive side, but like to me, I've got a background in energy. And right now, like they're at like the very seed stage of like deploying some energy products. And I think the same thing is going to happen there, where you've just got tremendous growth because they're moving better, faster than all the incumbents. And so you've got that, you've got AI, like you said, you've got autonomy. And so it's just an incredibly exciting future, at least to me. And the fact that they're growing so much exponentially. And then, Emmet and I like to use derivatives. So we've got like a derivative of an exponential if you're using options. And so that's kind of the play that we like to do to kind of accelerate returns in this environment.
Yeah.
Are there other? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, Chris, have you seen their Tesla bot presentation or anything? Elon's, have you heard about the Tesla bot?
I haven't seen any, like, I don't know anything. I just know what the FinTwit guys think. And then I realized that my error. And then I was like, then I realized that this guy is trying to build, and also look at Amazon, right? Amazon was a bookstore, but now they compete, look at Apple, they were a desktop computer. And now, everybody's competing with everybody now with this technology. So once you build something that transcends anything that we have, if you innovate faster, there's really no industry that you couldn't conceivably take over. So I think the car thing is kind of, okay, well, that's just sort of his way in, but it could end up being anything.
Yeah, the Tesla bot is a brand new kind of industry. I mean, a lot of people think it's a joke still, but it's not. Like they revealed this, like, basically like the R2-D2 of Star Wars. Is that the humanoid character one, R2-D2? I forget the name of the
C-3PO looked like more of a person. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a person looking thing. And it's like, they designed it. They're going to have a physical functioning prototype like next year, but they designed the specs and they market it as like a way to kind of attract AI talent to their firm, but they're building this, and the vision Elon has, which is very serious. And is this bot is they're building real world AI through neural networks, collecting data with neural networks and building real world AI applications to use it on. And they're going to have this bot, which will be able to perform virtually any human functions that humans do. Like whether it's, first it'll start out with doing like risky, boring things like picking up trash on the side of the road, but it'll advance to do virtually anything. It's going to the vision is that it could displace the entire human physical labor market, from replacing roofs to building houses to all kinds of things, like it's going to build, and that's 5 years away before they start delivering those, probably maybe 3 or 4 years before they deliver the first couple. But early on, it'll be primitive. But as time goes on, there'll be software updated through the neural network, software download, it's going to be incredible. Like we can't even envision, I think 5 years out, what Tesla could be doing. It's still early days. Like you said, like we don't know where we are in the function. Like it could be massive. Yeah.
Yeah, Real Man has them dogfight each other. Robot fights. I get mine. I soup it up. I put some different stuff on it. You get yours.
There'll be some of that. There'll probably be gladiator robot.
Sure.
Fight, we'll probably
Boxing's over. Boxing's over. We just want to see the robots kill each other.
Yeah, it'd be safer. Let the robots do it for us. Yeah.
A real man would fight the robot himself, though.
He would. I'll fight the robot. Yeah, exactly.
Well, he's making the robots so that they can't lift more than 40 pounds and they can't run more than 4 miles an hour, so you could outrun it. Worst case, he said.
There'll be some people selling some off-market software to boost those guys to self-defense and offense too. So
yeah, that's funny. But anyway, did you have something else you were going to say, Matt, before I interrupted there?
probably lost that
Okay.
train of thought. I have a couple other top pivot to if you don't
Yeah.
want to,
Let's pivot. Yeah.
unless you have something else. Yeah, one of the things we've already talked about it a little bit, but just your kind of willingness to put yourself out there at risk of having polarizing opinion that are like not kosher in this day and age. One of the things I noticed, I had a corporate job earlier this year. I found myself self-censoring there a lot. They were certainly infected is probably too strong of a word, but it had a lot of the things were just changing really fast where we were starting every meeting with like safety, and then the safety talk became like a personal, like I don't even know how to describe it, but like, oh, this is an inclusive environment sort of talk, and then it was like half the meeting became like all these. We want to make sure everyone's is aware that they're in a safe space now, and like I think a lot of people didn't necessarily agree with like that as a use of time, not necessarily disagreeing with content, but disagreeing with that as a use of time. But nobody wanted to like say up and say, hey, I don't want to spend so much time talking about diversity and inclusion, because then you're going to look like the Nazi, or the one who's has unpalatable views. So I had a couple conversations with folks in private who felt this way, but nobody felt comfortable kind of sticking their neck out. So what advice would you have to people who are kind of in that? I think Emmet and I have a little bit more freedom, and you've got freedom being more or less self-employed, working for yourself essentially. But for folks who don't have that degree of freedom, what advice do you have on being able to maintain that intellectual freedom while kind of sticking up to your core beliefs?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I do have more freedom than most, and it's one of the reasons I say stuff is because I'm like, if not me, then who, right? I mean, like, I'm doing okay, and it's my own business, and it is easier for me. It's not like something couldn't happen, but it's just, it's not some HR person just taps me on the shoulder like that. It's not going to happen. So I guess get into a situation where that's not the case, where you are free, because I think it is tough if you have to pay the bills and you have a family or something, and if you don't, and you want to say something, but you're like, okay, well, I said this and now I have no job. I think it might be for the best, but it's a difficult time economically for a lot of people. So I don't know. I don't really know what to say. I would just say, like, long term, try to be as self-reliant as you can. Try to get yourself in a situation where you can be honest with certainly with yourself. I think the most dangerous is when those people, as I said, their beliefs start to merge, because it's just, you had like sort of a difficult thing, right? You were thinking something that didn't fit in, but it would be a lot easier if you just didn't think that, right? Because you could have some people just probably believe
that was exactly right. And like, it kind of felt like a slow crushing death where, like, I really loved the people. Like my job, 4 years ago was great. But then it just like, it was kind of amazing how quickly it shifted to where, like getting the work done was less of a priority, and less of a merit for promotion than saying the right things and having the correct beliefs. And so it was very strange, to see where merit for the work that you're doing was less important than having the right belief system in a Fortune 500 company. So it was. I'm just still shocked, I guess, that this is the world that we live in. Where I saw people, getting promoted for those types of reasons.
Right. But those businesses are going to suffer for that eventually. I mean, maybe in the short term it's big enough that it doesn't matter, but that is not a basis for running something. I mean, it's just, it's a little scary that that's even going on, but it is what it is. Luckily, I'm not really in that kind of environment.
Yeah. Well, let's move to a topic that Chris often talks about, which is hot amongst our audience, is Bitcoin and crypto and stuff. So I know, Chris, you're a huge bull on Bitcoin. How did you first kind of learn about it, and when did you have that? Did you immediately have that kind of light bulb moment when you first learned about it, or take time to sink in, or what? No. Tell us about that a little bit.
So I didn't get in as early as you did, Emmett. That's for sure. But I don't know if that's public knowledge, but
no, it is. So, yeah, I bought a little at 2011, but not much. But I lost half in 2013, but I still have the rest. Yeah. Anyway, go on. Yeah.
So it was like probably 2016, and I had, I have a Sirius XM show, and my producer, a guy named Trevor Ray, was geeky like 27-year-old at the time. I don't know how old he was. He was like talking about it, a lot, in the breaks. He's like, "Oh, Bitcoin, you got to da-da-da, it's at 400 or whatever it is." And I was like, I'm always curious, but I didn't really, whatever. It's just some stuff he was talking about. He's one of the younger guys, I don't know. But then I don't know what happened, but I guess a friend of mine and I, good friend of mine, we just somehow it had percolated up. It was like the summer of 2017, and we just like got some. We're like, all right, let's just put a little money in this, and so we did. And of course, it went. That was that fall where it went crazy, right? That was the fall when it went up to 20K. And we didn't have that much, but it was like kind of exciting, like, whoa, like, this is sick, but then, once you own a little bit, you start to watch videos and, go down the rabbit hole. And it was, and so first it was Andreas Antonopoulos was the first guy I watched. And it was pretty exciting, like what, some of the ideas about it. But the guy that really like cemented it for me was Michael Saylor. You guys know who Michael Saylor is. He just explained it in a way from first principles. Yeah, MicroStrategy guy. And I ended up buying some MicroStrategy stock because I'm like, I have a retirement account that I have to buy stocks. And I'm like, oh, it's like a proxy, I guess. And he just really explained it from first principles. And if you ever get doubtful, you're like, I don't know, the price starts to go down, you start to get a little panicky, go watch one of his videos because he just builds the case from the ground up. And then you're like, of course this is true. This is self-evidently true. It's, it's like, Moses receiving the commandments. You're like, yes, this is true. It's not that you wouldn't question it. It's that he's answering the questions implicitly because he's building it up from first principles. I read part of Safety and Amos's, the Bitcoin Standard. I didn't think it was that well written. I like the guy on Twitter. He was a little like clunky, but the ideas were excellent. And I had heard some of those, just how it's not just money. People think like, oh, well, whatever, if NFTs are money, then they're money, or if Bitcoin's money, that's money, or if dollars are money, or whatever everyone agrees on is money, right? And that's true. What we agree on is money is money. But why would we agree on something? What is they call the Schelling point, the place that you would meet? Well, it used to be seashells, but the problem with seashells is if you were in the mountains, they were good, but then some tribe that had access to the sea would buy everything you had for a bunch of worthless seashells, and that was a terrible money. And they went through different things. Apples aren't good money because they rot, and they settled on gold because it was a really good money. It was hard to get more of it. And you could divide it into reasonably small, you could, heat it up and cut it into pieces. And it was durable, the same gold from 5,000 years ago is still here with us now. It was a really good money. It wasn't accidental they chose gold. Gold had all these really good properties. It's like the Safety book, which is really informative. And, so then Bitcoin is like gold, but like 10x. As Michael Saylor says, gold is really good over time. Bitcoin is really good over time and space. If you want to send $1 billion worth of gold from the US to Australia, it's going to cost you a lot of money. You're going to need a lot of security. You have to test it. It's really, really expensive. But and it's going to take some time. But if you want to send Bitcoin $1 billion to Australia, it'd take 5 minutes. It costs $5. And so this is a huge, huge edge in terms of being, working really well over space, not just time. And so he builds it up like that. And the safety and stuff is like, it's not accidental what we decided is money. So I don't know about NFTs and stuff. I don't want to say no, because I thought Tesla was bullshit and I was wrong about that. So I could be wrong about this. But to me, it sounds like bullshit because it's like, they're like, I hear people saying, well, these could be money. This little, picture of an ape could be money. Look, the picture of the ape, if someone wants it, it's worth what it's worth. It's worth what they want. So I'm never going to say you can't sell it to someone else. But is it going to be money in the way that, that Bitcoin can? I just don't see it. I don't see any I just don't see it having the properties that it would need to have. So that's why that's one of the reasons I'm really bullish.
Yeah, I see the NFTs sort of as like digital collectibles or digital art, almost like modern day art, but in the digital world or something. It's worth what people want to pay for it, like you said. But the store of value, digital gold is Bitcoin. I don't see how, if there's a digital gold, how that's not going to be Bitcoin. I've said, and so yeah, that's what I think is true for Bitcoin. Matt, you started looking at Bitcoin. When did you start looking at Bitcoin, Matt? And when did you first start investing?
Just last year, actually, like late last year, I started getting into it. So I was, a little bit late to the party. And I would say I'm cautiously optimistic around Bitcoin. I'm not necessarily sold. And to me, one of the hard things to figure out is which of, all these new cryptocurrencies out there. I mean, there's like hundreds of them now, and I think most of them are probably going to go to zero over the long term. But some of them seem like they'll survive, and I wonder when, or like, will Ethereum transplant Bitcoin, because it seems like there's some utility that you can build on the back of Ethereum that you can't do with Bitcoin. But Bitcoin has a lot better security, for example, and it seems like it's better at the function of the kind of store of value. So what's your thought, Chris, on kind of the different roles different cryptocurrencies could play, and how do you think of the other kind of players in the space?
So I don't know much about them. I know a little bit about Ethereum. I try to understand it, but no matter how much I read, I just sounds like bullshit, like mumbo jumbo that like finance people tell you. Like they'll be like, "Oh, I'm trying to get you into this like specialized instrument, annuity for life insurance, plus you get to pay, and you're like, what's in it for you? Why is this so good for me?" And you really just can't get to the bottom of what is the deal here? Like how much, that's what it feels to me. Like they use all this jargon and I'm like, God, there's smart people talking about this. I really should understand this. I should be capable of it, but I just have not. I haven't tried that hard because I glaze over after a while, but I don't understand it. But I understand, but I also know that a lot of people feel that way about Bitcoin. And so I could be making the same mistake that they're making, right? So I have to always be, I could be wrong, but here's the fundamental difference between, go ahead.
I was just going to say what you were describing of like these smart people using jargony words. It just so reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen The Big Short, but like, all these investment bankers that, would use like the most, inflated jargon. They sounded so smart, but nobody knew what the hell they were talking about. Yeah. And really they were just, maximizing their own paychecks in the short term. So like, I think it's good to have a healthy amount of skepticism about some of this stuff.
I should be able to understand it, right? Like, I may not be as smart as Elon Musk, but I'm smart enough to understand if all these people are doing it. I should be able to completely understand what's going on. If I don't, but I haven't tried as hard as I could. So, maybe it'll come to me. And a lot of times you understand because you own something and you're more motivated. I don't own any of it. But my understanding of why I'm not interested in those, and again, I'm not saying that means they won't amount to something or one of them won't, is that Bitcoin has an advantage, which not only is the network effect, which is a huge advantage, but also the immaculate conception. Satoshi is gone. There is no person that the government could say, put a gun to his head and say, shut this down now. It's not possible. It doesn't exist. There's nobody there. There's tens of thousands of nodes around the world. And if you shut down some, it doesn't matter. The next block will be mined. It's just impossible.
China.
Yeah, we just saw that with China. Yeah. Yeah.
You're talking about one of the most powerful countries in the world, the most populous country in the world, bans it, and within a couple of months, it's back to its all-time high. I mean, this is powerful, and that's actually really bullish, right? Because it just showed that that's not even possible for an extremely powerful state actor. And then secondly, there is nobody to lean on, no one to sue, no one to rug pull you. Thirdly, it's proof of work, right? And there's an energy discussion to be had around that. I think it's actually incentivize the most ridiculous amount of energy growth, and stranded sources of energy. We can get into that, but that work is part of security. So it's really, really hard how much energy goes into it to basically fake that and cheat. Whereas Ethereum is something called proof of stake, which I don't entirely understand, but the people that I read say it's kind of like our current system. Like if you have a lot of money or a lot of Ethereum, or if you have a lot now, you're sort of controlling how the system is secured or the rules. I'm probably misstating.
Yeah,
this,
and also with the advent of DeFi, you could potentially borrow a ton, with obscene leverage for a short period of time to try to fake a transaction. There's certain holes in the proof of stake algorithm or function, but I think overall it's much more energy efficient, which is the argument for it, and much faster and energy efficient. And that's something you and I sort of have disagreed on, and we've come to an agreement to kind of disagree just on the possibility. I think there's, like Elon Musk has said, that there's if Elon Musk is saying something, I listen. I almost operate with the motive of like, whatever Elon Musk is saying or suspecting, I believe it to be true until I can disprove it, which I know is obscene, because that's like how you're not supposed to look at authoritarian. But with Elon Musk, he's like one of those people that I feel like whenever he said is almost always turned out to be true, even if it's controversial. What? And when he said that there's energy problems potentially with Bitcoin, the proof of, which is based on used because of the proof of work algorithm instead of proof of stake, that it could create more carbon in the atmosphere than clean energy, or a delay in the transition to clean energy, because so much of the dirty energy would be continued to be used for Bitcoin mining. But I know you don't necessarily think that. A lot of Bitcoin bulls don't think that. You're not alone. Almost every Bitcoin bull doesn't believe that, right?
So I'm just going to ask you about your Elon Musk statement. What do you think Ron Wyden was up to before his Twitter profile picture was snapped? I just thought that was so funny. I talked about it in the podcast. So funny. Yeah. I actually agree with Elon there that those people don't deserve respect. Like our elected leaders are not doing a good job. And the idea that they come down on him, I don't have an opinion on Elon Musk because I don't know. I haven't really looked into him. I don't really want to say he's good or bad or anything. I don't have enough knowledge. But just these guys telling him what he should do. And, I just think it's hilarious that he just shows them such disrespect. And I agree with him. It's like, who the hell?
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I said I thought you were dead, but the Ron Wyden one was even funnier.
Yeah,
but it just I just thought that's hilarious because it's like, you guys don't deserve respect. I don't need to respect you just because you're elected to the Senate. You're not doing shit. But anyway, but back to the energy discussion. The thesis is that Bitcoin, the energy is connected to the real world, and that's what secures it. It's not this sort of like anybody can kind of mess with it. It's connected to the physics of the real world, which is another property of why it's so secure and unique. But with the energy, it's like, I could plug in a miner to my, place in Portugal, but electricity is expensive here. And so I've got to obviously pay for that electricity, and then I could get some Bitcoin, mine some Bitcoin, but I may lose money on that. It's not a good deal. But if somebody has this stranded hydroelectric, China used to have all this hydroelectric that was surplus. You could plug your miner into that, and the energy is basically free, and you're gonna be able to use as much energy as you want. That's not even causing any problems, and you're actually getting Bitcoin. And so all these miners have a huge incentive to get cheaper and cheaper sources of energy. So plugging into the grid where it's competitive is just a mistake. And so there's guys going to Texas, and there's natural gas companies that have methane flares, and methane's worse than CO2. And they're capturing the methane and using it to power the miners. So it's a net negative, and it's free, right? They're basically just doing a service, and they're getting energy to power the miners. And they're at a huge competitive advantage to everybody else who's using even coal, even other dirty energy, any kind of electric grid. And so the beauty of Bitcoin is you can go to like the ends of the earth and get energy that's totally stranded from like a waterfall or something like that, or geothermal, like in El Salvador, they're using volcanoes. And the thing is, the problem with energy around, the remote corners of the globe is, there's energy everywhere. There's all these natural sources of energy, but you can't transport it. How am I going to get Antarctic energy to the grid in New York? It's not possible. Mm-hmm. Well, if you can turn that energy into Bitcoin, which is money, that Bitcoin can be sent to New York instantly. So you're basically able to extract energy from places where zero carbon, you could do it with zero carbon and at the same time, connect that energy into the system. And so it's gonna drive incredible innovation because everybody's gonna want to get cheaper and more stranded energy that's not even in use for free. And all the energy, the most polluting energy is usually the most competitive. I heard one guy make a good objection to that is, what if Saudi Arabia amps up their oil production because they can mine Bitcoin with it? And, instead of using the reserves, they start burning more. That was one, right? Because they might feel like this is a better game than selling the oil. Yeah. Okay, there's some things. But in general, the direction of this is incredible bottom-up innovation from all sorts of people with very creative ideas for whom it's going to be much cheaper at scale to move their operation to the ends of the earth than it is to pay for the energy that's on the grid.
Yeah, no, I agree with that argument in principle and in theory, but I do buy into like the theory the person said you mentioned about the Saudi Arabia thing. Like, if the price of Bitcoin jumps too fast, too high, there is a point where it makes sense for Saudi Arabia to say, hey, let's just mine Bitcoin with all the oil we can now because we can make a fortune, So there is a point if the price gets too high too quickly where I think it backfires. That's my argument. I think that's what Elon was trying to say. He's like, hey, we got to monitor this to make sure it doesn't get out of hand. Because at that point, the Bitcoin price had gone up to $60,000 for like the first time ever. And it jumped from like 10 or 20,000 to 60,000 in a matter of months. And if it kept on that trajectory, it seemed like energy usage might have been going in that direction. I mean, that's the point. I guess.
There's one other thing that it doesn't scale, linearly like that. Like, it's not going to be like, well, if Bitcoin's twice the value, there's going to be twice as much energy expended. It doesn't quite work like that. And second, if Saudi Arabia is actually using their oil to mine Bitcoin instead of selling it, Well, that means we no longer have to arm the Saudis, right? Like that means, I mean, like basically we secure the monetary system with our military, and our, that oil is being used for things that are not like necessarily benign. And we basically secure the financial system that we're in with incredible amounts of military and planes and cargo and stuff. So, there's that also, that it's like, what does it replace also?
Yeah.
So, you got to,
I mean,
it's going to replace.
And like you said, it's not linear, but there is definitely a correlation, with the energy used for mining versus the price of Bitcoin. It's not linear. I don't know what kind of scale it's at, but there is definitely seems to be a strong correlation. But anyway, that's a good discussion we have open between us that we've bantered back and forth on, and messages on Twitter or whatnot. So it's good to chat with you on that stuff.
Hopefully, I'm more right about this than I was on Tesla.
Probably are. Yeah. So
I do think oil is unlikely as an electricity source, though. I will just say, natural gas, which Saudi Arabia does produce a decent amount of that as well. That's much more efficient for producing electricity.
Okay.
So, and the other thing to keep in mind is, like, it's hard to kind of flip a switch and just start doing Bitcoin mining. You need the rigs, of course, to do the Bitcoin mining, but you also need natural or the electricity generator. So like if Saudi Arabia wanted to do that, they'd have to build a lot more plants. And I'm not an expert in the Bitcoin mining part of it, but my understanding is you do need kind of a stable flow of electrons. And so renewable resources tend to not really fit that bill very well. I know there are some like cited at wind projects, but then they end up buying most of their electricity from the grid. But they, some of the wind will get there about 25% of the time. So, it helps offset some of the, dirtier pollution or dirtier and more expensive electricity needs. But it's very hard to scale that up. And like geothermal doesn't scale very well. Flares in Texas don't scale very well. I think there are always going to be, kind of cagey entrepreneurs who find those opportunities. But if we're looking at this scaling drastically over the coming years, I do think we're going to need alternative sources of kind of reliable energy to support Bitcoin mining, and it's not clear to me what those would be.
Well, that's Bitcoin. That's go ahead, Emmett.
Aren't they having? Isn't there like a halving happening soon? And isn't it? I mean, is it changed? But isn't Bitcoin supposed to be done? Isn't all the mining of Bitcoin supposed to be done by mining of new Bitcoin supposed to be done by 2026 or something? And
2140.
2040. Yeah. Oh, so it's a longer way.
No. 2140.
2140. I thought it was 2028. I didn't know it was that far off.
Unless Elon gets cracking on some new technology, none of us will be alive at that point.
Okay. All right.
But I know, I don't know what your health practices are, but 2140 is a serious ask.
Yeah.
But I will say that the David Deutsch book, and I agree. Like I think that you're right. Like if you're doing massive scale, right? Like it's going to be hard to use. I don't know. You should read Nick Carter is excellent on some of this energy stuff. I'm just summarizing, paraphrasing. I don't really know. I'm not an expert at this, but the David Deutsch book is sort of like you can extrapolate. Just like Tesla, you can extrapolate backwards and say, okay, here's the energy we have now. If we don't do this, then a lot of it's going to have to rely on the grid. But of course, what you can't extrapolate is creativity, right? Is new inventions, new innovation. And I think that basically all you can do is have good rules in place. And so basically this incentivizes lots of different people to get really creative for generating a sustainable and steady flow of energy at zero marginal cost. And I think that's the way to go, is basically put the right rules in place and trust the human innovation to take us there, but to have some idea of what might, it's not just like out of left field, but we have some idea, but you're probably right that it's not there yet to scale to the way that we probably need it. And the halving will be in 2024. And it basically just the miners get half the reward. So now they get 6 1/4, they'll get 3 1/8, I think in 2024. Which is just, it's basically a deflationary currency where the supply coming online every 4 years goes down. And that's just a very good thing for something that's a store of value.
And that's actually one of the arguments Elon has for Dogecoin, is that it's, instead of deflationary, it's inflationary built in. What is it, 3% every year or something is added to the supply of Dogecoin. So I guess there's an argument both ways. Like, if you want it to be a store of value, people can kind of just I guess hoard is a negative connotated word, or just save or whatever, then Bitcoin is great. but if you want it to be utilized and exchanged, instead of just being used to like hold value, Dogecoin has an advantage in that it has like the 3% inflationary built into it every year. As the population expands, you need more participants involved in it and such, I guess. What do you think about that?
I don't think Dogecoin is a serious thing. I don't think they have serious like people working on it. I don't know if Elon was joking or serious, but the way Bitcoin's going to scale, for payments and things beyond a store of value is Lightning Network, and basically all the on-chain stuff is the heavy lifting, and that's the big settlement. Eventually, when it's 10 million a coin, it's going to be for banks and stuff, and you're going to have a couple thousand in your wallet, and it's actually going to be in your browser, and you're just going to you want to read an article, you don't have to subscribe, you just pay 10 cents, worth of Bitcoin through the Lightning Network. And it won't be as secure as Bitcoin, but so what, you lost, $500 or someone hacked your wallet. It's not, your life savings in there. I think that's how it's going to actually happen for the payments. Bitcoin is actually slightly inflationary. I mean, there's more that comes on every, so often, but the 21 million is capped. And I just don't think any of those other ones are secure. If you can inflate it, then you can destroy, then you may as well just do the dollar and central bank currencies and have the digital currency where they can print what they want. Yeah. This is the one that there's just this much. And because of that, nobody can dilute you. And that's why it's, I think that's why even big time, investors and companies, Tesla itself, has it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I mean, are there any other interesting, coming up on the hour, any other, you and I like your take on health a lot, nutrition. I've heard, it aligns a lot with me and stuff. That's something we haven't talked about, but is there any, we could always say that for another time or whatnot. Is there anything else about like investing or, you said you had some interesting ideas. Do you have any thoughts you want to talk about with that?
I don't want to give you guys bad information because you guys are probably much better investors, better investors than I am. The only thing I'll say, and I just thought about this week, and I was 9-0 against the spread on best bets, and I lost last week. Okay, and, if you do the math, it's 1 in 512, and 1 in 1,024 to get to 10, and I lost, and I just came up with the realization that I hope I didn't lose because of the math. I hope I didn't say, oh, there's no way I can keep this going, it's unsustainable, and just made sort of a bullshit half-ass pick and lost. I feel like you do not, the only time you want to know about probability in the math is when you're playing cards or playing flipping coins or something that's pure probability, not things like observing a complex system like the NFL or investing, which is very complex systems that you're observing in real time. If you look at the probability, you will only do as well as the probability because it will paradigm that you will have that I must regress. It's not possible. But we see people do things that are impossible all the time. We see Tom Brady win his 7th Super Bowl. That's just not possible. Yeah. It's not possible. Yeah. If he looked at the math, he would have won 1 or 2 and said, look, this is crazy. I'm not this good. Don't think about that. So I don't know how that exactly, but just, don't have a paradigm that's based on a model that's coin and card and dice based. That limits your upside because of the regression and the things that probability basically says must happen to investors or anybody doing something where there's uncertainty. So that was just something I thought of today, and maybe I'll close on that. Leave it on that.
No, it's helpful. It's like there's lots of disruptive opportunities out there that we don't even imagine as a possibility. So you can't even really put it in the probability spectrum at this point. And so, yeah, it's always new stuff going on. It's complex. And yeah, no, I've found it helpful. Yeah, thanks.
It does kind of resonate with something I've been thinking, actually, which is, I was basically taught in, finance when I was going through my, academic studies that, the average annual return for stocks is 7% per year. And it's always been that way. And it always will be that way. And that was basic, like, and a lot of financial models and analysis are kind of based on that. A lot of benchmarks are kind of based around that line of thinking. But with where we stand today, with all the disruptive companies coming out there and kind of the promise of AI and a lot of software to really kind of accelerate the rate of economic growth overall, so GDP growth might drastically accelerate. It does seem like there is a good probability that rule of thumb historically will break over the next decade plus. But I don't think many people are kind of open to changing their view on that.
I think that's exactly what I'm saying is like, if you're stuck in that model, that's the return you'll probably settle for, so.
Yeah.
Well, maybe one last piece of advice. I was unfortunately born like a Detroit Lions fan. How can I get out of this desperate cycle?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's I would have called social services when you were a kid and separated you from your parents for letting you be a Lions fan. It's tough. It's not good. It's not that promising. But you never know. I'm a Giants fan. We're not good now, but we've had our success. And I don't know what to say to Jets fans and Lions fans. It's a tough lot in life. It's just a lot of suffering with very little payoff. But
Yeah.
And actually, my survivor pick in my $6 million survivor pool, knock on wood, we got the Browns. We're fading the Lions this week. So
Yeah, I'm like you, Chris. I was a huge. I grew up in Long Island and huge Giants fan and huge Eli Manning fan. When he retired, I was interested in Barkley and stuff, but I'm just not so interested in the Giants anymore. And it's hard for me to get back into football. But a funny little story is a lot of my success has been investing in Tesla, but a lot of that success is because I was able to test drive a Tesla early on in 2013, and you could only test drive a Tesla back then, or 2012 maybe it was, the test drives, and you could only test drive them. They were before they were being delivered, the Model S. You can only get it if you had a reservation in, and you had to get a reservation by putting $5,000 in. And back then that was a lot of money to me. Like, we were just barely affording month to month our mortgage payment, and my wife wouldn't let me put $5,000 on this car we could never afford. It was like $80,000. We had to drive like a Hyundai for $16,000 at that time, barely paying month to month on that. But I love new technology, and I was trying to figure out a way. And then that last Giant Super Bowl run, I just saw something with Eli again. I was like, I think the last game before the playoffs, it was like they had to win to get into the playoffs. And I was like, I think they're going to win this, and they're going to go on a run. They're going to get hot. And this is like the first game of the playoffs. I'm going to put $100 down on the money line. And I'm just going to, if they keep winning, I'm going to keep doubling it down on the money line all the way through. And it would have turned into much more than $10,000 if the online betting thing let me put more than like $500
the limits.
down at a
You hit
time.
the limits. Yeah.
I hit the limits. So I do think of all these like advanced parlays to try to get it.
Yeah.
But I turned it into $10,000, $100 eventually, which was great. And I was able to put $5,000 on that reservation. So like, this is my money. My wife can't tell me what to do with it. I put $5,000 on the deposit. What's that?
It was winnings. It was profit.
Yeah. Winnings. Exactly.
House money.
Profit, winnings. Yeah. And I put it down, and then we went to go test drive it a few months later after I had the reservation down. And it was like the greatest thing, ever, test driving that Model S. Back in 2012, like driving the first Tesla Model S, like it was just phenomenal. And it really emboldened me to go all in on Tesla from that point forward. And so I like working hard at my job at the time, going up the ladder, was mostly incentivized by trying to do well enough in my job where I could actually afford that car, and then live vicariously enough to put enough to the side to buy Tesla stock and options, because I was just, it was all because of Eli Manning, is what I'm saying. My faith in Eli Manning.
Nice. The Giants launched your that's great. That's
my career. Yeah. My investing success. Yeah. So anyway, that was an anomaly, right? You shouldn't be able to turn $100 into $10,000 like that, but that was some weird thing. Yeah.
You saw something, I didn't think they were going to win.
Yeah.
It was my job, and I didn't think I was very happy that they won, but I didn't think they were going to win.
Yeah. It's funny. So, and it's funny, if you put like $100 on the odd, they have the odds, like who could win the Super Bowl. It would have, I think at the time it was like 30-1 or 41 Giants. So $100 on a 41 would turn like $4,000, but you do much better betting on those money lines over and over. You could make much more, it was just an interesting observation I had about those lines. Anyway,
there's a big rake with all that stuff, with all the futures bets. So yeah.
Well, it was great chatting, Chris. Thanks for having us. Thanks for letting us interview you and pick your brain on stuff. And I look forward to listening to your podcast weekly, and we'll put it in the link of description for our audience if they're interested, in your Twitter profile and such. So yeah, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.